Let's talk mastering. What is mastering? So loads of engineers and artists put on this mysterious voice around how mastering is a dark art, only really understood by the upper echelons of the music makers. It isn't really. Tell you what there is though, there is a difference in what mastering means depending on who you talk to. You see, if we go back a step to when music was mostly being consumed either via the radio or via CD, what mastering was then was it was a standard that everyone could conform to. We referred to it as Red Book audio, basically a checklist of things that you needed to hit to all be at the same standard to ensure that everyone was using the same sample rate, the same bit depth. And what this meant was, regardless of the type of music or how it was being made, everyone would end up with the same bit depth, the same sample rate. Now, a little bit before this, we had to master to the medium again. It was going to be vinyl, and that was a different process entirely, but more on that in a bit. So today, it seems the main focus is loudness, getting the mix to be incredibly loud. You see, the other thing mastering did and started to give was the opportunity to make a body of work feel as if it was all one cohesive album of work, if you will. People were being more creative in that they could adjust the final mix and get the final balance and the final compression and loudness levels to match throughout a whole album, making it feel far more cohesive. So mastering's conforming to these standards, but also about making a larger project feel cohesive as a whole. Which is what you would want to do before you distribute your music using something like DistroKid and getting it on platforms like Spotify, Apple Music and Tidal, and doing that at a price that an independent artist can easily afford.
It's story time with Anders.
So the first thing I ever mastered was back in 2004. What I used to do was I volunteered at a radio station, and what we used to do is we recorded interviews. So someone would be being interviewed by the host, and those recordings would go onto a mini disc. Yeah, mini disc, remember those? Now after a while, a series of these interviews was going to be pressed to CD, and you could listen to all of the interviews that had been on the radio. Sure. So my job was to get all of these in Adobe Audition, which at the time supported a grand total of 2 audio tracks at 44.1 16-bit. I think there was probably better options around at the time. I think like Reason 2 existed, so probably Cubase SX, but that's what they provided me with, and I was skint and doing it for free. So what I had to do was get a master of all of these interviews together, and essentially I used the same kind of things that we use now, you know, EQ, compression, and in this case I used a little touch of reverb across all of them to give them a consistent room sound where things varied slightly. And now you know why the Ozone plugin used to have a reverb module as well. Well, what about today though? What is mastering now? Well, with the resurgence of the niche vinyl and cassette releases, we've actually gone back 2 steps, and we now need to master for the platform again, but now we need to do it in multiple different ways. If you're putting a limited edition cassette or vinyl out, that needs to be mastered completely differently to something going out for streaming or CD. With that said though, the majority of music goes 2 places now: streaming platforms, venues. Now recently I got this comment on a video I did talking about mastering. Our target is going to be -14. Everyone can get that with their eyes closed. That is a really good way to mix. People don't master to -14 Lufs. This is the biggest myth and false information around in this day and age. I am a certified mixing and mastering engineer who was recently graduated from Berkeley. Now I assume he means this Berkeley because I couldn't find this place. Is it true that streaming platforms normalize the volume of songs if it's louder or lower than -14 Lufs? Doesn't mean you should master songs to -14 Lufs. Here's the reason. Perceived loudness is increased by compression. That's because compression reduces dynamic range, bringing the lower levels up to a higher level while maintaining the consistent level of the previous highs. Because of these things, a track is mastered to -6 Lufs and brought down in volume. Will still be louder than the song that was mastered to -14 Lufs brought up. No, because -14 Lufs is an average loudness standard. it will not be louder. We'll prove that in just a second. So what I've done here, got a track that was mastered to around the -14 mark, put it all the way up to minus about 7.5. I put -8 as the marker in there. And then I've reduced it back down to 14 like the platform would. So this is it playing back at full quality. You've got to remember that as well. And this is going to be the difference. Let's check it out. There you go, guys. They sound basically exactly the same. They would almost null cancel. More compressed one, the one that says -8 in this case, did to like -7 in a bit, sounds a little bit more compressed. It's a little bit less dynamic. It's a tiny little bit less punch, but for the most part, they sound pretty much the same. Now, when you're going onto the platform, it's not going to be streaming back at CD quality. Even Apple Music's lossless is a FLAC file format. And if you say nobody listens like that, you live in a very small world, that's fine. I'm going to play the very loud mastered one first, that's been reduced in bitrate, and then I'm going to snap back to the -14 master, which is how I would do it and how the platforms ask you to deliver it.
Think it's time for me to go. Nothing else I can do or show. Falling is the only feeling that being with you was my
rams it home that if you deliver something that's drastically wrong for the platform and the source it's going to, it's going to sound like horseshit. So if we ask Google, we get the -14 Lufs. Spotify, on their website, they ask for the masters to be around -14 integrated Lufs. Waves Audio Mastering Guide, they actually recommend for streaming services around -16 Lufs. Now here's the caveat. Mr. DJ goes to play your track. Well, he can only see the peak levels and he doesn't look at the Lufs over time to try and match them. We're looking at peaks, so we match that on the fader. Hopefully we're just maybe touching the yellow, not into the red, guys. You know, we dropped the track that is -14 Lufs and the previous track was done to -7 and it drops in, the levels look good and suddenly it's considerably quieter. That is where this really comes in. We need to master for the platform it's going to. So what is mastering in today's environment? Well, it's basically somebody checking over your final work and making sure you've got everything right for the platform you're going to. All mastering should do is bring a cohesive element to multiple tracks to bring them into an album and check for any final issues at that end stage. And I think Gavin Lurson probably said it best when he said this.
Peppered in there. There's color, there's style, there's vibe, there's attitude, but the most successful job that we can do is to make it sound like we were never there. So if that becomes a felt sense and not thought of, that's when we are at our most successful.
So in short, when I talk about mastering music for streaming services, the reason I talk about the -14 Lufs area is because that's what the platforms want. Because in the end, when your high quality file that you provide, your 16-bit 44.1 kilohertz WAV file or AF file goes out to Spotify and gets condensed down to 128 kbps MP3 to be streamed, and it was slammed at -7, it loses so much quality overall. Now the next big question is, should you master your own music? Well, that is a whole different debate, and I covered that in this video here, and you could watch that next and see my thoughts on it, and we'll go over doing a master, although beware, I did master to -14 Lufs.